So the purpose of this video is the midpoint formula. What the midpoint formula does is tell you how to find the halfway point between 2 points on the Cartesian coordinate system. But before we look at the Cartesian coordinate system, let's recall how to find the point halfway between two other points in just one dimension, so on the number line. Say you have 2 points, let's call them A and B, on the number line, and you want to find the point M for midpoint that is exactly halfway between them. So of course that means that it's the point between A and B where the distance between A and M and the distance between B and M are exactly the same. In one dimension, it's really easy. The midpoint of A and B is just the average. And of course, the average of two numbers is found by adding them together and then dividing the result by 2. Now let's look at what happens in 2 dimensions, so in the Cartesian coordinate system. So in the Cartesian coordinate system, let's make a point x1, y1, and we'll make another point x2, y2, and we want to find the halfway point of the line segment that you get if you draw a straight line connecting x1, y1 and x2, y2. Because this is the halfway point, we want the distance between x1, y1 and M to be the same as the distance between x2, y2 and M. Here we're going to assume a little bit of knowledge of geometry, and we're going to make 2 right triangles that have hypotenuse of length d. It turns out that these right triangles are congruent, which means they're exactly the same, which means all the corresponding side lengths are exactly the same. So this distance is the same as this distance, and this distance is the same as this distance. See, here's the point x1, and here's the point x2, and the x-coordinate of M is exactly the halfway point of x1 and x2. So our x-coordinate is the average of the x-coordinates of the 2 original points, and with similar justification, the y-coordinates of the midpoint is the halfway point of the 2 y-coordinates. So the y-coordinate of the midpoint is just the average of the y-coordinates of the 2 original points. And this is what's called the midpoint formula. But all the midpoint formula really says is that to find the midpoint of the line segment connecting 2 points in the Cartesian coordinate system, you just average out the 2 x-coordinates and average out the 2 y-coordinates, and that gives you the x and y coordinates of your midpoint. So let's look at a quick example before we end. And let's find the midpoint of the line segment that connects -1, 3, and -2, -4. To find the midpoint, we average out the x-coordinates, and that gives us our x-coordinate. We average out the y-coordinates, and that gives us our y-coordinate. So the midpoint of the line segment connecting -1, 3 and -2, -4 is -3/2, -1/2. Let's see if this is reasonable by drawing a little coordinate system. So -1, 3 is about there. -2, -4 is about here. And -3/2, -1/2, which is supposed to be halfway between these 2 points. -3/2 is -1.5, so that's about there. So is it reasonable for me to say that this little blue point, -3/2, -1/2, is halfway between -1, 3 and -2, -4? Yeah, that's pretty reasonable based on the picture drawn. And that is how you find the midpoint of the line segment connecting 2 points in the Cartesian coordinate system.